And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Cathy Fisher, who at age 21 died from pneumonia and went to the other side, where she had a profoundly life-changing experience, including interacting with the great light. Cathy, thank you for joining me today and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
If you don't mind, Cathy, let's just start on the day that it happened and go from there.
Okay. I was a college student at the time, and this had followed one or two fairly profound spiritual experiences I'd had that I could only describe pretty much as some type of awakening or hello. Anyway, I had become very ill with pneumonia. And I was at home and I was by myself. And by home, I mean I was in my parents' home and schlepping myself to college, which was nearby just for that 1 year. And I knew I was ill. I felt awful. Most of us have felt this way. It's kind of like you can feel death working in your cells. You just feel, ugh. And I had some trouble breathing, but I was not aware that I was as ill as I was. And so I was just in my bed and I was resting, and I had been doing a lot of sleeping, as one often does when you have pneumonia. And I thought I was starting to go to sleep. So I'm just lying there and resting. And all of us, as I'm sitting there, it's kind of weird because it was both gradual and sudden. My body started to relax in a new way. It's like all the pain just left. And any of the stresses just left. And I thought I was falling asleep, but then I realized, wow, something is cool. And I felt myself as if I was rising, like going above my body. And I kind of glanced down for a moment and saw myself lying there and going into, it wasn't dark, but it was as if it was a dark fog or something. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm dying. And all of a sudden, I found myself in a space that I know a lot of people describe this as a tunnel, and it kind of is, but it's kind of not. It's like it feels circular, but it feels cozy yet infinite. And all of a sudden, I was as if I was zipping through space fast, but without any fear or any physical feeling really about it, just a little bit of sensation. And I knew I was dying, and I was like, I didn't know this was going to happen. But you don't really have time to think about that either. And all these like lights, little stars were going, like I was going past them, but it felt like they were coming past me. And the further I got, and this was all very fast. I mean, it seemed like it happened faster than I can explain it. I realized that those stars were people, like ancestors, or people that had been. And I felt like I know them, but I don't know them. And as I got toward the end of whatever that trek was, there off in the distance was this beautiful light. It was very white, but not blinding. It was glowing. It was warm. It had so much radiating from it. It's not describable. But it was love and peace and just this phenomenal sense of well-being as I kept going closer and closer. And then I got really close to it. It's as if I was standing in front of it, if you were, although I'm not aware of standing, sitting, or anything else. I'm just there. And I remember just being in awe and just kind of soaking it up and enjoying it. And I'm aware of other presences around me who I felt like were ancestral, or even some people that I know who had passed. But they weren't individualized. They were just sort of all there at once. And I felt like a lot of beings were there. And the few things that I remember actually hearing coming from this light, I just knew that this light was, I guess, what we would call God. This represented the creator, the all things that are. And I remember sensing Jesus being down kind of at a certain port of that. So it was just like I recognized the essence. But I heard this light say to me, you're going to go back because this is not your time. And I remember thinking, yeah, I know that. I can sense that. But I also remember thinking, oh man, wouldn't it be great to stay? At the same time, I knew it was not my time. And I have no sense of how long I was there. I have some sense of receiving things, but I couldn't exactly tell you what it was in some cases. It was beautiful. It was so profound. When I went back, it's as if I went backwards, yet you can see all directions at once. It's very hard to describe because we don't have that here. And I passed those stars again, or maybe they were different ones, but it was the same type, but it was going back closer and closer to my body. And when I re-entered my body, it was kind of like I thudded back in. You know, it was like maybe a small electrical jolt, or I don't know, but it's a little bit of a thud. Didn't hurt, but there was a sensation that came with it. And when I re-entered my body was a bit chilly and stiff. Not totally stiff, but fairly stiff. So, judging from what I've read, I would say that probably made me gone 2 to 4 hours, but I have no sense of time about it at all. What is crazy about all this? It was so profound and so deep. I told nobody. I almost didn't know how to process it. I just had to experience it. And it's not like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. People will think I'm nuts. That came later. But it was just so profound. I just had to be with it. And I did get better very quickly. I got better very quickly, and even had somewhat of a miraculous healing after that, which I can also tell you about. I came back different. I don't know how to describe it. I was still me, but I came back different. It was as if I was less of a fit in the world in some ways, but more understanding of why I was here, and therefore felt more comfortable at the same time. Things that happened or that occurred to me related to that kind of happened over time. Like, I'd always been a little bit intuitive, psychic, whatever you want to call it. I was a little more so, but mostly I understood it when I came back. Now, I don't remember actually receiving information that helped me process that. I just understood it. And it just seems like when weird things happened in the world, or things were sad, or things were hard, or awful things were going on in the world, it was if I could just accept it as being what it is rather than fighting it, because it seemed to fit into the scheme of things in my being. And I found myself more open to different spiritual traditions, different ways of thought, whatever. At the time that this happened, I don't know how to describe myself. I had a Christian experience. I'd grown up Christian, and I'd had a definitely Christian experience. I wouldn't describe myself as extremely conservative or maybe evangelical, but I would say my beliefs were very limited. Um, but I just became very open, very open. Since that time, I've come to understand many things that were not in my original tradition. I've remembered several past lives and things like that. But that whole experience changed everything in ways that it's really hard to describe. But I used to be extremely anxious, and I am now amazingly laid back. Um, I think just life seems to fit into this isn't all there is, and I'm very relaxed about it. And while I was never really afraid of death before, I'm definitely not afraid of it now. It's just like, oh, it's going to be beautiful. And for that reason, I have often been, sometimes the Native Americans call it a death walker. It's kind of like a hospice volunteer. There have been many people who were at the end of their lives, including my mom and a few other people that I actually know, who I've sat with and said, and told them about my experience, feeling like it would be helpful for them. I don't necessarily tell everybody. It's neither a secret nor do I throw it out there. But to tell them, look, you're going to love this. This is beautiful. When you see what you see, just enjoy it, because your loved ones are there. The one who loves you and created you the most is there. And it's just going to be beautiful.
Cathy, thank you for sharing your experience with us.
You're welcome.
When you left your body, did you feel expanded? And then when you came back, did you feel like you were stuffed back in your body?
Yes. Yes, I kind of did. I had never really thought about that before. This is why I love doing things like this. It kind of reminds you to put words to your experience. Yes, I did. I felt like all of a sudden, I guess I kind of felt like I filled the room, but it wasn't uncomfortable. And then filled the tunnel. And it's like you might be seeing things apart from yourself, and yet you're very much part of them. It's everything really is one. And it ends up sounding trite when people say that, and it ends up sounding yeah, man. You have to experience for it to really sink in. But yes, I did. I felt expanded, and I felt like I was part of everything, and everything was a part of me. And then yes, definitely more funneled in and refined into the body. And yet I still have a greater sense of being connected to things outside of this confinement of the body at the same time. And one of the things I also wanted to say when I say that the light spoke to me, it's not like you hear it with your ears, or I didn't. Uh, Everything was telepathy. But it was just as clear as if somebody was sitting next to you having a conversation and you can both hear fully. What an experience that is. I mean, that is the most full kind of hearing you could ever imagine, because not only is what is said heard with the ears, processed with the brain, and then you do something with it, like in steps, like you do in your body, it just becomes part of you the minute you hear it. It's like you hear it and it becomes you, and there it is. It's beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Before we started this recording, we spoke a little bit, and you mentioned that you are a classical musician.
Yes.
Did you hear any music on the other side, or has this experience changed the way that you play music?
A little bit. I will tell you that as I was doing the traveling part, I heard, if I were to describe it, and this is almost a guess, it's almost like angelic voices singing or humming on a chord. And I will tell you that that's not the first time I had heard it. I had awakened in the night and heard that in my sleep several times before this. Um, and it's hard to describe. It's almost as if it's a praise of all things existing. But I didn't hear music per se, no melodies, anything like that. It just wasn't part of my experience. I've known some people who did or have heard of it, but that was not my experience. Um, and how I experience music differently now, it's just more enjoyment. And that may sound weird, but when you do music for a living, it's a job. It's not that you don't enjoy it, but it really is more of a job when it's a job. And I think what happened is I just began to live a little more through the music. And I think a lot of musicians experience this also, whether or not they've had an NDE. When you're a child, and especially if you're introverted, you kind of hide behind your music. And then as you become more comfortable, you come out of it through your music, and it expands you, and then you experience more. So that, I would say, that heightened that for me in a really cool way. And one thing to add that's just an aside, I wish we had a different name for the NDE, or near-death experience, because I really experienced death. I kind of like temporary death experience, but I don't know that there's an actual whatever. But whatever it is, it's amazing. And it gave me just such a profound understanding of death, as we call it, as a transition to something that's phenomenal. And it really is more expansive. It's really more expansive. We're afraid to let go of what we have here sometimes, but what we go into is this and more. So it really, it's very liberating, very liberating.
I like the words that you use, temporary death experience. I actually think it's more accurate.
thank you. I like that too. And I'd love to tell you it was mine and it was original and I came up with it, but somebody else did and I stole it. I found it on some Facebook group online and that's what they called it. I went, oh my gosh, that's so much better. You know, yeah, I liked it too.
You mentioned that you became more psychic. Can you tell me about that ability and any other new abilities you gained after your experience?
Yes, I'd be glad to. And I have some that are far more practical. So, as most people would see practicality. I had always, as a child, been very intuitive and somewhat psychic. I just knew things about people when I met them, or especially under some circumstances. I just knew things. And I thought that was a common experience for everybody. I did not understand that that might be a little bit unique. When I was about 5, it dawned on me that even the adults around me are not understanding some of the things that I just understand about people or that I see. And one of those things was I would occasionally see spirits or ghosts, as some people would call them. Um, and that wasn't a big thing. There wasn't a whole lot going on with that. And it certainly wasn't like anything you see on TV or the movies. It was strictly they would be there. I feel like there was something I'm supposed to know or do. And then they'd kind of disappear or dissipate. And I'd be like, geez, what was that about? Or it gave me kind of a funny feeling, not quite negative, but it was weird to me. The other thing that happened to me when I was a small child, when I was about 5, I don't know what happened. I guess it was maybe some kind of anxiety attack or something. But I saw what I would call an angel at my bed. And all I could tell at that age, at the age of 5, was that he was huge. He was bigger than my dad, who was 6'6". This guy must have been 8 feet tall, and he was dressed in white. And he just said to me, "It's okay. Everything is well. Don't be afraid. Just go to sleep." I kind of pulled the blankets up over my head and I looked and he was gone. And at 5 years old, this may sound funny, but that doesn't seem that weird. You know, it's just one of the many things that plays through your head like a dream. You don't think a lot about it. And it took years. I must have been a teenager before I realized that was an angel. So anyway, I'd had quite a few experiences with things. So when I had this experience at 21, it helped me kind of weave those things together into my life so that they made a little more sense. Because sometimes those things would scare me, not so much from I'm frightened by them, but why do I have this? What am I supposed to do with this? I mean, I know things are going to happen, or I see this about this person. Why do I know this? Is there something wrong with me? And of course, my mom, trying to be caring about me and trying to keep me from being afraid, would be say things to me like, well, honey, there's no such thing as ghosts. So I thought I was kind of crazy. She was trying to be helpful, but it actually had the opposite effect. So when I had this experience at 21, and I can't tell you why, but when I returned, I came back with a type of contentment and settled feeling about this. And I began to understand that all this is you're connecting with spirit. There's a connection with spirit. And I may need to go in and say, why do I know this? Am I supposed to do something with this particular information? But the main thing is it's all spirit. And it's all connected with touching spirit. And it doesn't matter if it's information that you use or not. And maybe you are supposed to do something with it, maybe not. But whatever it is, you've tapped into spirit. Don't be afraid of it. It's okay. It's just spirit. And so that was very helpful for me. And some of my being relaxed and better with it, I can't even put into words. I'm just okay with it. It's just, rather than it making me go, "Oh, okay, that's weird." It's just like, yeah, okay, there you go. Kind of like when you have a strange, aberrant thought cross your mind. You go, well, where did that come from? It's just more relaxing now. You had asked about other abilities. I've had some abilities that are, again, hard to describe. Often when I look at something and there's something wrong with it, I kind of know how to fix it and I don't know why. Not so much mechanical, but I think that's because mechanical things freak me out. But like we talked about that I do a little interior painting and plastering. Well, the plastering itself, I really enjoy, but I have this almost intuitive knowledge of how to fix something that's really crazy. And it's like I just sit there and it occurs to me, oh, this is what you do. And that type of thing has happened more often too. I find that I write better. I write more clearly. I speak more clearly. Um, I have better connections with people now. Um, I have more of an intuitive connection with animals now. I think I sort of understand them by looking at them. It's almost as if I hear their thoughts a little bit, not like someone doing an actual reading of an animal where they're getting a whole lot of information, but I just seem to have a connection with those things better. Um, I could never draw before. I mean, I tried and tried to draw, and I took art classes, and quite frankly, I sucked. I just couldn't get it. And it's something about my perceptual abilities. All of a sudden, I'm able to do artistic things that I could not much do before. So I took up wood carving, and I've done a few other little paintings and things like that. And I'm finding that once I get over that initial woo of trying it, um, I'm able to do it more easily. And so I find that there's very little that I try to do that I can't do. Um, and um, and that's a little strange. It's almost as if I have more gifts or something that were just kind of given to me. Like I said, what's so strange about that is I do not remember moments of here I'm giving you this information or here I'm giving you this gift. It just sort of happened. And there are lots of things that I just plain understand that I didn't understand before. Things that people wrestle with, like why there's suffering, in the world, or why does this happen? I find that I'm very at peace with the things that go on, and it fits into the framework of the universe and what's going on better than it did before that. So I'm just more connected to understanding things. So it's like I was given understanding genes or something, but I just understand things better. I kind of understand connection with God, spirit, whatever. I understand that better now. And things just seem to sort of make sense. But the other really cool thing is, and I find this is true the older I get, when things don't make sense, I'm okay with that. I was one of those, I've got to have an answer. I've got to know the truth. I just got to know this. And I'd research and I do. And that's great. And I still love to read and learn. But if something just doesn't make sense with me, I can be okay with that. I can be okay with that. And I think that was not true before my NDE. It would just drive me crazy.
You mentioned suffering, and I think most people suffer while they're here. Why do you think we suffer in general?
Boy, there's a lot of answers to that. I think we suffer a lot because we are trying too hard. And we're trying too hard to make things perfect sometimes. Let me make a distinction maybe between pain and suffering. And these are kind of my words, so don't take these as, oh, this is the way it is. You can have pain in your life. You can have physical pain, and you would probably draw a distinction between pain that hurts and pain that is suffering. And that suffering goes so deep that there's no relief, and it affects every aspect of you. Unlike when you hurt your knee and it hurts, and maybe it makes your back hurt too, whatever. Suffering is whole body. It just hurts. Everything hurts. Your brain hurts, your heart hurts, your body hurts, your eyelashes hurt. Everything hurts. When you talk about emotional suffering, we go through some things here in this life that we can only experience here on earth, on this learning plane. One of them is the loss of a loved one. I think almost anybody listening has probably had someone pass away who they loved. Might even just be a pet if you're younger. But there's a pain that goes with that, and that pain runs pretty deep. If you never deal with that pain, if you never work that through and learn how to bring the best parts of the person who passed on forward with you and enjoy the joy of that, you'll suffer because all you're in is the pain. when it comes to like human suffering, like why bad things happen to good people, let me just first say that there's a lot of really bad theology in the world. And a lot of people say, well, this happened to you because you did this thing wrong. Or some type of awful thing happened because God is trying to teach you a lesson. Well, that's crazy theology. But yet we've been taught it since we were kids, and it's wrong. Things do happen, and people do suffer. So, for example, God is not a bully. God is not a bully. God does not impose something on your life to teach you a lesson. But things do happen, and we can use that in our life to connect with the God of our understanding, or with spirit, or even with our own inner self, whatever you want to, whatever connects with you, and develop an understanding and move forward and heal. But suffering, for example, one of the worst things I can think of is a child being. Well, there's not a why to that. The why to that is that some human beings have developed a bad psychological situation for whatever reason, and that sickness causes pain and suffering. But there's never a situation where God wants that to happen just so that the child will grow up and help others or something like that. But I believe that what God does want is that whatever happens in our world, to understand there's no limit to God's presence within us and our ability to heal. And it may take a little time. We move with that and come forward out of that. And I think sometimes, that's a long-winded way to say, sometimes why there's suffering in the world is we misunderstand why things happen. And sometimes we're so hard looking for an answer to why things happen, we trip ourselves up. So as I like to say, even in more formal settings, poopies happen. And poopies happen, and you just deal with what happens. If you're all the time going to spend time looking for the reason why something is going on, you're going to suffer because you're not healing from it. And you've got to find a way to let go of wondering why and just go, it happens. It happens to good people. It happens to people who are misbehaving. It just happens. And somehow that near-death experience led me to be comfortable with those things. Now, when I say I'm comfortable with suffering, I'm not saying I want to suffer or I'm comfortable with other people suffering. I'm not. I think we need to alleviate suffering. That's a part of why we're here, is to help ourselves and others not to suffer and to grow and to be whole. I think the whole purpose of our existence here is to become whole in the body while we have these signals of, ouch, that hurts, in a way that we can't when we don't have the body. So I think we are here on a teaching plane and we're learning. But we got to kind of stop the stuff going on around us to go, okay, what do I do with this? How do I move this to where I heal and others heal? Because if you can make life a little easier for just one person, it goes a long way. I mean, even if it's as simple as somebody's $20 short on their electric bill, and you manage to give that to them and the relief that provides them. And then maybe they go on and do that later. And maybe those two people go on and do that later. And by the time you've done that, you've brought relief to anxiety and to situations. So what happens is, when we go on to become whole, we help to relieve other people from their pain and their suffering. And the more we do, the more that puts it out there. And so suffering doesn't have to happen. Pain's going to happen. You're going to have people pass away. You're going to have natural events that mess up the world, that destroy things and sometimes take lives or cost a tremendous amount of loss in some way. And you're going to have people who mistreat you. And you're going to have even atrocities. The trick is, what do we do with it? How do we move forward? And I think that's one of the things that the NDE showed me. It showed me you need to figure out how to move it forward, how to keep rolling with this. Because eventually you're going to be whole. But you've got to go through some steps. You got to walk through it to get there. So this may sound a little odd, but my objective in the world, for myself personally, my goal, is when it does come time for me to pass, I'd like to leave here without any excess emotional baggage. And I'm hoping that if I'm able to do that, if I'm able to just deal with the things in my life, feel the pain when it has, acknowledge it, whatever it is, and move on and heal and help others, I have so much more energy with which to deal with when things do come up. If I'm busy agonizing over something that happened to me in the past, I don't have a lot of energy to deal with what's happening now. So I'm just hoping that this view of becoming more whole, this view of helping others, find their way. And we have to speak their language. If I'm a Christian, I can't Christianize everybody. If I'm a Buddhist, I can't expect everybody to understand my language either. We just got to meet people where they are, just like the light met me where I was, and give them whatever it is that is our portion to give so that everybody becomes more whole. Because we're moving toward that eventually. So we all hope we're all moving toward healing. And love is a big part of that. Love is a really big part of that. And by love, I mean just caring what happens to other people. You can love and care about what happens to another person who is an awful human being. It doesn't mean you have to enter their world. It doesn't mean you have to buddy up. But you can care about what happens even to a person who's misbehaving. And that's love. It's just caring.
You mentioned that you had a miraculous healing. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. It's pretty simple. I was attending a church at the time that was very unique to me. And it was a Christian church. And there was a woman there that had a real unique gift of healing within herself. And she was a musician. And by a musician, I mean, this was bizarre. She had a spiritual musical gift. I used to joke and say, you're playing chords that only you and God can hear. This woman could sit down at a piano and organ and just say, okay, let's do a song. And she would play a song, and it might be slightly jazzy or slightly whatever. It would be beautiful. It would have so much depth you can't even grasp it while you're sitting there. And it would rhyme, and it would be all in one spot. It was just on the spot. I've never seen anything like it. Well, she and I were friends, and we were fellow musicians, and we would sometimes play together, and those were magical moments. But I finally dragged myself into a service, and I was staying away from people, not that I was contagious at that point, but this was probably a week or two after the NDE. And I was still feeling like in some ways I was walking above the ground. I still had a whole lot of heavy pressure congestion in my chest, the type where you cough and you hear 38 different tones coming out. And as she was playing the organ just before church, that pneumonia literally just sucked itself out of my lungs and went away. Gone. I was fine in an instant. And it was just like, oh my gosh, it's gone. So that was that. So it came out through her playing the music and the flow, and I don't have a better explanation. It was just that flow of love and healing that came through the music.
Can you tell us about some of your past lives and who you were in those lives?
Sure. I don't remember any of my names. Sorry, I was not Cleopatra. I was just regular people. My most recent life, I was in the Nazi camps, and I don't remember a whole lot about any of my lives. The only thing I remember is I was a girl, and I'm going to guess I was probably about 14 years old. And I know I had a sister, and I died in the camps, but I don't remember the specifics. I know that I had a mom that was somewhere, and I don't know what happened to her or where. And that's pretty much almost all I remember, except a few just like almost snapshot scenes of what went on in the camp. Interestingly, in this life, I have met several people that were also there. And so some of us recognize each other, others don't remember. But that's about all I remember of that life. I have a couple of lives where I would be some type of Aboriginal person. I think one was definitely Native American. Another was similar, although it may not have been in this country. And there is one person I remember from one of those lives, and she remembered me as well. And we talked about times when we would like wrestle in the woods and play and just do this stuff. And at the time, we were both boys, and she was my cousin. So it would have been a he at the time. So he was my cousin at the time. And all I remember is he did go off to war on a horse and came back dead. And that was devastating. Most of the times I remember are peaceful and like I remember foraging. The other couple of lives that I remember fairly well, one I would say was either in Ireland or Scotland, I'm not sure. And I lived in a stone house and had a fireplace. And this is the life about which I have the most memory. I really don't know when it was. If I were to take a stab, I'd say the 1500s. At the time I was male, and I had a wife, and I had a daughter. And in this life, my wife and my daughter were killed by somebody. And there was a trial. And I went to the trial, and it was pretty much a farce. And they let the guy off free. And I was devastated, absolutely devastated. And I walked to I called a pub and drank myself stupid and got angrier and angrier and sadder. And there were like 4 men in that bar who were laughing at me and laughing at my situation. And I got really angry and I stood up from this little table and ended up getting in a fight. And I ended up dying in the fight. And the only thing I really remember about the fight is that the guy broke a chair over my lower back, one of the guys. Interestingly, in this life, I had a former partner who that wife was, and who is now her niece was our daughter. So there is a connection there. I don't know the niece very well at all, but they even look a little the same. The only other life I have a really clear picture of, it was another life, probably somewhere the same, somewhere in the British Isles or something, also early on. And in that life, I had the same mom I have in this life. And I was born a girl, and I just knew I should have been a boy. And I was devastated over it. Nothing was working out. And eventually I died by suicide. I ran off a cliff, and I did that probably in my early teen years. The only other thing I can say is there was a man that I dated in this life earlier on, and I remember our genders being reversed, and I was his husband and he was my wife in another life, but I don't remember that much about it. So those are just a few of the snippets, and I'm sure there's a lot more that I don't actively remember.
How were you able to get these memories? Was it through hypnotherapy or something else?
Well, most of them just come, especially if I'm really relaxed, like almost half asleep. Some of them had been, I do need to tell you about that I almost forgot, which is the most essential one. Sometimes I had dreamt things and I woke up and I went, that's a memory, not a dream. I did do a couple sessions of hypnotherapy to remember a little more of one of the lives. So I did do that, but I didn't remember a whole lot more, just kind of confirmed for me what I thought. Probably the biggest one, and this is what led me to understand that reincarnation was real. I was kind of struggling with this not long after my NDE, and I'm going, I've always been taught that it's not real, that this was something, but I'm feeling like it's real, and I'm just throwing it out there, God, if this is real, let me know. So I'm going through our newest and greatest store in the valley here, which was Books A Million back in the day when they were brand new. As I'm walking past a display, a book fell off. And I pick up this book and I look at it. It's blue, looks like clouds, and I put it back. Don't think much about it. But I felt drawn to the book. And as I was walking back out, again, I brushed that table and that same daggone book fell off. And I went, okay, I'm taking this as a sign. So I picked it up and I looked at this book. And it was a book written by a psychologist who lived out in, I think it was Nevada. and he lived near the California border, and he had been doing work with several different clients, none of whom knew each other, who were from California, Nevada, that whole area up there. And he tells a story of a thread of memories that they have that all have similarities. And as I was reading this, I got fascinated and I bought the book. I took it as a sign. And I got to a certain point of the book and my hair stood on end because this thread dream memory thing that these 5 people were all reporting at the same time who were from different places and whatever was my dream. I had that dream over and over and over. And what it was they were all present at the crucifixion of Jesus. And in this dream, they just describe a few things going on, but one of which is a guy at the bottom of the hill running up toward the crucifixion, and a soldier throws a spear and hits the guy in the head, and it knocks him back. And the reason my hair stood on end was I was that guy with the spear, and it didn't kill him. But when I was a kid, there was a little boy with a wooden bow and arrow in my neighborhood, and we were playing on the street and just doing the trashy things kids do. And he shot me in the head with his wooden bow and arrow, and it actually stuck on my head, not in, but on for a minute, and I kind of took it off and I went, this has happened to me before. And then I ran up the street to try to go beat him up, of course. But, I just remembered that clearly, and it's like that one almost gave me this has happened to me before, and it snapped into me. And I'm thinking at the time, I was probably about 10 or 11. I don't really know. But when I read this in the book, I mean, it's like every hair stood on end, and I went, oh my God, this is my dream, and that was me. So that's when I went, okay, this was the answer to my prayer. God is saying to me, yes, reincarnation is real, and this is why you're remembering this.
What inspires you about your NDE?
Wow. There's such a full answer to that. It's hard to know where to begin. The NDE itself was inspiring and so profound that talking about it almost doesn't cover it. The effects that it has had on my life have been beautiful. Sometimes I have experienced lighter but similar experiences through really deep meditation or something, but it doesn't quite come the same. It just connected me greater with everything that is, other than just me, my life in this body, running around meeting these people. It connected me greater with everything that is part of me, yet sort of outside of the confines of my physical body. God, the universe, other beings, people that have gone before, other energies, whatever. It lets me know that there's far more than we understand. And even after an NDE, there's far more than I understand. I have a friend who's had 2 NDEs, and I haven't had much of a chance to talk to her about it, but I can't imagine haven't had 2. But it's such, it's eye-opening, it's heart-opening, it's mind-opening, and it reminds you to do those things now, even while you're just running around in yourself doing your daily thing, to just open yourself up to what is, and to just experience it, and to express the awesomeness of having life with other people. How to show that. And, I've been to a few other places. I even went to a church and gave a sermon about my NDE and did a class on it. People asked me questions. And I'll tell you one of the questions somebody asked me because I hadn't thought about it before. But no matter how much you talk about it, you can't spit it out. You just can't. You can't explain how profound it is. We don't have the words. We don't have that experience here. So it's like you could try, but you're never quite going to hit it. The question this one person asked me in this church thing had not even occurred to me. He said, well, when you were there, did you feel like you were male or female? I've talked about being different genders and different lives. And I said, I didn't think about that. I said, I felt like both. I felt like neither. It's nothing. I was still, I had my thoughts. They were definitely mine. I wasn't aware of my personality or my quirks per se, but I was definitely in my own mind. I was not aware of being male or female, not aware of having a color or even a body per se. I had a sense, like outline of where I am, but I just was part of everything and yet not in any box. There was nothing that we would define ourselves by humanly that existed. And so it just didn't matter. And it didn't matter if I was Christian, Buddhist, atheist, none of the above. It didn't matter what color, what gender, whatever. You're just the essence of everything you could ever be when you're there. And so you wouldn't even think about it. So that's what led me to think about that when he asked that question. I'm so glad he did, because I hadn't thought about it.
Since you're able to see spirits and or ghosts, what do you think happens to those beings? Why are they still hanging around compared to like going to the light?
Okay. And let me clarify all the time. I see them here and there. And so I think I see them for a reason, if that makes any sense. I think some of them are already in the light they're visiting. They just come back and visit. It could be a parent. It could be a friend. They actually help. They give us help. They're like, I don't know if I'd call them a guide, but they really help us to move and make better decisions if we're open to it. So they can visit. They can go anywhere they want to go. So they're not necessarily stuck. There are a few that are stuck. There are a very select few that don't understand that they're dead. But that's really rare. That's really, really rare. Some of them choose to remain kind of on this plane, if you will. And that's, again, hard to describe because it's like everything is here at once, you know. So heaven or the other side or whatever you call it isn't really another geographical location. It's another vibration. It's another experience. And that's really hard to explain. But there are a few who are attached. Say, I lived in a house one time, and there was a woman who was a ghost who was in there. She was attached to the house. She was the caretaker. And I didn't get a whole lot out of her, except that she never owned the house. She did live there. But she felt herself to be the caretaker of the house, and she was there to make sure everything was okay. And when we were getting ready to move, she was upset. But I explained to her why we needed to move and why I thought the folks coming in were going to be great. And then she was okay. She didn't want to move on because she wanted to be a part of that house. I don't know if that's good or bad. I have before gone in and released a spirit to go into the light. I've done that before. But I also know that they can go anytime they want to go. And you don't want to force anybody to go where they don't want to go. You just want to encourage them, just like people. So why they get stuck, I guess what I would say is when you pass to the other side, it's not like all of a sudden you're given a whole brand new set of thoughts and you're somebody totally different whammo. You're basically the same person. You have less restrictions because you don't have the body, but you are not necessarily, it's not like you suddenly go through a 5-second seminar and you're perfect and everything's great. I mean, you're still kind of you. And so when they go to the other side, whether they know they're on the other side or not, there's still learning going on, which actually should be encouraging. How disappointing would it be if you lived here for some 85 years and that's it, and then you go and all of a sudden, wham, you're great. I mean, that's just like boring. So this is a good thing. You know, we get to move on to a next phase, and some of us will come back into a body. Lessons are easier to learn in the body. They're just easier to learn in the body than they are on the other side. That's because there are cues that we have in the body that just aren't there. But anyway, so the main thing is if anybody sees a spirit or a ghost, if you will, and it's a kind of a new thing for them, just don't be afraid. Because for one thing, on this physical plane that we're on, we, the physical people that are here, we're spirit, but we are physical too. We have the dominion. And those things are not to have dominion over us. And if they're bothering you, tell them to go away. And they will. They have to. They're in your space. And you can say, this is my home and my space. I do not want to be bothered now. And I want you to stop waking me up. I will be glad to talk to you at 10 o'clock on Friday if you want to. And find out what you want. But be prepared to tell me what it is that you want, so I see if I can help you or not. You just talk to them reasonably and logically, which sounds crazy, but you do, because they have to do it. They have to do it. This is your dominion, your domain, and that's the way it is. So if you understand that, and you let them understand that you understand that, they're not going to bother you. Basically, nothing can haunt your house unless you let it stay there. Now, that's different than giving permission, because sometimes things will happen and something is kind of stuck in there or whatever. And that's another thing. Stuck energy, sometimes people think are a ghost. It's not always a ghost. You can get just energy stuck in a house and things are not right, and you just assume it's a ghost, if that makes any sense. Just like, I don't know if you have ever walked into a room where someone just had a really heated argument and they're gone. You walk in and you're like, ooh, something doesn't feel right. Something weird. You just know something's off. Well, that energy is still there and it's stuck. And the same thing can happen, and you can get stuck energy from hundreds of years ago in a house or on a property or in a location. And it's just hanging there because energy just keeps floating. It just keeps going. So don't be afraid when that happens. You can address it if you want. You can tell it to leave. You can clear it out. There's lots of ways to clear energy out, and talk to a lot of people about that. But if you see something or experience something that you don't understand, the first thing is don't panic. Don't panic. You're seeing it for a reason, and even if the only reason is just so that you understand it exists, it's just kind of there for you. It's kind of there for your learning.
What kind of advice would you give to people who recently lost somebody to the other side and are grieving?
Well, some of the advice is extremely practical and anything anybody else would say. It's hard. Give yourself time. You're going to hurt. It hurts. Even if you know and understand that that person has gone to a new place, and even if you understand you're going to see them again, the fact that you're missing them now and it's different, it hurts. It's okay that you hurt. Don't look down on yourself for experiencing that. That's normal, and that's why we're in the body, to experience those things. So deal with that. Understand it is a loss, but don't stay stuck. Don't stay stuck. Everybody's in our life for a reason. And what we need to do is take the beautiful parts of that person and think about it. Move those things forward with them. And if there's a trait in them that we wish we had more of, or that we have and we want to again, do it in their name. Just think about that and move it forward. Sometimes counseling will help. Counseling is very helpful for a lot of people. It just helps you process things. Some people like to process things a lot. Some people don't. But the thing you don't want to do is don't just ignore it and move on, because it'll come back and haunt you later. It really will. One of the things when my mom died, and that was big for me because my mom and I were quite close, and I took care of her pretty much as she died. One of the things I did was I scheduled times to think about it and mourn in the early days, because otherwise it would sneak up on me. And you don't want it to hit you Monday at 10 o'clock when you're going into a meeting. And it will if you haven't given yourself time to release the grief and, like in my case, cry or just whatever. So I would actually schedule times about once a week for me to really think about it and let myself be sorry and let myself hurt. But I would always end that with all the gratitude for the things that she gave me. And that will help you. That will help you move forward. Another thing is to celebrate that person in a way that works for you. It might be lighting a candle. It might be just talking to them, but by all means, talk to them. I would do that when other people aren't around. If they don't think you're crazy, then they'll just kind of look at you funny, even though we all do it. But just say, hey, Mom, I miss you. Wondering what you're doing, almost like you're just talking to them, and just start having a conversation. They will hear you. Maybe you'll hear them back, maybe you won't, but you'll feel the presence. So it's a combination of dealing with it and letting it heal at the same time. And to also remember that no matter who you are, your way of dealing with grief is different than the person next to you. So we don't want to give somebody else a funny look or a hard time when it's taking them longer, or maybe they're sadder, or maybe they're not leaving the house as much, or whatever for a while. You do you, heal however you need to heal, and give people space. And if you feel you need to give them an invitation maybe to get out every now and again and do something differently so that they have a chance to move on, that's fine. But just be aware that everybody does it differently, and that's okay. It's all right.
Kathy, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Absolutely. I'm on Facebook. My name is Cathy with a C, Fisher. And all you will see on that is my mug. It looks pretty much just like this. And somebody can reach out to me there. They can. I would suggest that you send me a message, say saw you on the podcast, and that way I'll reply back. Because typically I don't friend people I don't know, but if they'll message me that way, I'll be glad to chat that way, and then we can friend each other on Facebook too if they want. Whatever. That's probably the easiest way. Like that.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Life always exists. Always. No matter what state you're in. Whether you're living on this physical plane or somewhere else. We're eternal beings. And we're eternal beings as a part of a larger entity of love. God really is love. Whether or not you've had an NDE, whether you've had a profound experience or not, what we call God really is love. You'll hear a lot of bad theology in your life, but just remember God really is love. And if you hang on to that, anything else you can compare that to, is this love or is this not? You'll know if that's something on which you want to stake your thoughts or spend any time. It's all about love.
Kathy, thank you for that message, and thank you again for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. I've had a great time. It's nice to get to know you a little bit, and I hope that everybody out there that hears this is encouraged and feels better about things or confirms what they are now. Let's keep the love going, and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.